there's some variables depending on the day, but generally speaking, the main context, what I always do, especially first, is like I vibe out, which I describe in The Joy of Not Thinking, like the last section of that book. By vibing out, I mean pretty much what we just did at the beginning of this group session, where I like to lie down, not sit down when I do this usually. I have my eyes closed usually. And then I'm with the body, I'm with my thoughts, and they might be all over the place, but I let them be. I let them be, even if I feel really anxious physically or really whatever, I'll let them be. Occasionally, if I feel really out of sorts, which usually in the morning, if I feel out of sorts, I just let it be and it passes. But if I feel really out of sorts, I will talk out loud to myself to kind of ground myself more. But I usually don't do that. Usually I'm just letting everything be. And like, I'm thinking of my high ideals, which is like, health, wealth, peace, or in a word like God, or, it doesn't offend me to say like, I am God, or we are God, or like, I am supply, we are supply. Because it's like, I mean that not about me. It's like, this is, everything, the universe, like, but it's more just that state of like, I'm just there, right? And then what I've gotten more into, I've done this for years because I like it. Like, I like it. I want to do it. Like, I like to do it. I miss it when there's the rare morning when I don't get to do it, or I don't get to do it for as long as I want to. I miss it basically. But for like the last year or so, I've gotten more into the Maxwell Maltz idea of like the quiet room, of like, I often now will, instead of just being there physically and not focusing on anything visualizing wise, now I often will, because it's easy for me, it feels natural. I'll take myself to a beach, a specific beach, and either be on the beach or be on some rocks on this beach. And it's very calming for me. I've done a bunch of hypnotherapy work with my hypnotherapist over the last 2 years on this beach in my mind. Okay. So this is like a very specific subjective thing. So it's like a very safe space for me. So this is where we get away from the absolute method. So that's still the absolute method as far as I'm concerned. So I'm just at that space. I'm on the beach. I'm vibing out. I'm just there. And it just is like, we're just there to be there. If I have time and if I'm in the mood, or if stuff's coming up, this is where I defer from the absolute method. Okay. After doing the absolute method for maybe 10, 15 minutes, I do some like internal family systems work, some IFS work at that point sometimes, which is like, I have different quote unquote parts. Like I have a small child, like a little boy me part that like I might bring in. So he's on the beach with me, for instance, you know what I'm saying? And if I feel anxious, it's probably because he's anxious. My more adult parts, which is like, I have like an accountant adult part, like, and like like a gardener adult part, and like I don't know, more of just like a laid back joker type adult part. Those parts usually aren't that, they don't get that emotionally unkempt, but sometimes my child part gets very scared and nervous, right? So if I'm going through one of those times, I might bring him to the beach or have him on, he's just there, right? Again, I've done hypnotherapy on this a lot. So it's like, he just comes in and he can be with me on the rocks. I can comfort him, or I can also bring in my adult parts to comfort him, or I can bring in someone like Kue. Like I have Kue visit me sometimes on the beach, me and my child part, or just me if I want to ask him questions. These are just examples. None of this stuff when we're talking about parts and me bringing in Kue is the absolute method. Okay. That's all like supplemental, but that's just like, if you want to know like what exactly I usually do, it's going to be probably just the absolute method or me on the rocks. But like, if I'm going through a lot of like, if I'm feeling more anxious basically, or more nervous or worried about something, I might bring in the child part or bring in another part, or bring in Kue or some other spiritual teacher if I think they can help answer questions for me. Um, and I get answers, because I've done this for a while, and it's not different than the videos I've done recently, where it's like talk to your feeling and ask it questions, and it will provide you an answer if you're patient enough. And like when I'm on that beach, it's a very safe space, and we're relaxed, and we know it's non-judgmental, and we communicate. Stuff happens. The child, I've learned to love this child. Like when I started doing IFS work with my hypnotherapist, and she's just a therapist too, I was like, oh man, I have to deal with like another kid. And I was very reticent, to deal with another child because I have two real children already. And it's been very, very gratifying work. Like the last, I'd say 6 months or so, just learning to give this child more love and more space on his own. And it's been very, very helpful. And this is why I talk about therapy and IFS and stuff like that. Because if you told me 5 years ago I was going to be doing therapy like every week or two with a therapist for years, I would be like, no way. That's way too in the box for me. So what happened for me is I had to find the most far out way to get into therapy. I had to start with hypnotherapy and then do more like IFS is very far out. I mean, not all kinds of therapy are like IFS or whatever. That's pretty far out there. But now I value therapy. So that's why I recommend everybody get therapy if you want, it's so helpful, and I wouldn't have said that a couple of years ago. You just learn different ways to accept yourself better. Again, like the Rogers quote, right? Rogers was a therapist, in my opinion, you learn that all these different things, LOA, self-improvement therapy, they're pointing at the same thing, which is about self-love, self-healing, and accepting yourself fully for who you are. This has been a long answer.